On one hand, most of us probably believe that humanity is screwed and that climate change only continues to get worse with time, largely because we are not taking enough action on it. But on the other hand, there are signs of positivity. Solar, wind, and battery technology is cheaper than it has ever been, and it will continue to get cheaper with time. We now invest in these technologies more than fossil fuels. So is there hope for fixing climate change, or is humanity screwed? Let's talk about it. What's going on, you guys? Welcome to my channel. I'm Luthra, and today we will be talking about if there's any hope for fixing or at least getting around climate change. I know a lot of you feel like that there's no hope left and that humanity cannot get through the worst effects of climate change. But even if that actually ends up being the case, I don't think that's the right mindset to have, and I'm going to tell you why in this video. We will talk about the reasons people feel hopeless, some reasons that there actually is hope for a positive future, and finally, I'm going to tell you what I think is the most realistic scenario that will happen, and more importantly, the mindset that we need to have no matter how bad things get. If you're a climate change denier, I'm sorry, but this video is not for you. This video is for those who accept that humans are the primary driver behind climate change and that we need to do something about it. Okay, now let's get into it. I think the main reason people feel hopeless about climate change is because that's what hits the mainstream media. When you hear headlines about wildfires in Australia, extreme flooding in America, and how these events get more extreme and common with time, it doesn't make you feel good internally. It gives people the thought of, well, if it's this bad now, then how could it possibly get better in the future? There are even studies out there that suggest that these events lead to climate change anxiety, which harms people's mental health because it creates feelings of stress and sadness. The other main reason people feel hopeless is because we don't take enough climate action. Our governments and corporations tend to take actions based on how much money they can make rather than how much they can help people and the environment. That's why denial and misinformation campaigns continue to get more widespread with time. I made a separate video on this topic which you can check out in the top right corner. But long story short, it helps to protect the profits of the fossil fuel industry and keep them in business. The selfishness and greed involved in this capitalist system will not work if we want to preserve the planet for ourselves and future generations. There's a lot more reasons that people feel hopeless, but I think you get the idea. Now let's look at the other side of the coin and see why there are signs of positive changes coming ahead. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, energy generated from renewables like solar and wind are now cheaper than fossil fuels. In fact, they are the only power sources that cost less than $50 per megawatt to generate. Through 2026, renewables are expected to account for 95% of all the increase in global power supply, especially in countries like China and India, which require high amounts of energy to produce goods that they sell around the world. It's not just renewables that are expanding, it's also other technologies and movements that are expanding for the environment. For example, people are starting to realize the benefits of adopting plant-based diets, not just for the environment, but also how it can benefit your health and how it can address animal rights. In 2022, about 22% of the world is vegetarian or vegan, and that number continues to trend upward. Other technologies like electric cars and carbon capture are also on the rise because they too are getting cheaper, resulting in increasing demands across the world. To be fair, these changes are not happening fast enough, and we do need to replace our existing technologies and energy sources with cleaner and more advanced ones. But the good news is that if our leaders don't act now, they will fail later because change is inevitable. Because green technologies are cheaper than ever, it would be a bad business decision for most of them to not decarbonize. Now that we have talked about both sides of the coin, what's the most realistic scenario that will play out? Personally, I am doubtful that we will meet climate goals like net zero by 2050 or staying under 1.5 degrees Celsius. But with that said, I don't think feeling hopeless is the answer. Realistically, climate change will continue to get worse. It's not an issue that hits us in the face until a hurricane or wildfire happens where we live. It's not an issue that can be instantly fixed like a broken pipe. Fixing climate change will require a lot of capital, time, and effort, which most people would rather not deal with until it gets way worse than it is right now. But despite all those setbacks, you have to understand something. Whether or not climate change gets better, we will all have to take action on it regardless. Whether it's mitigating it, adapting to it, or more likely than not, both. When you feel totally hopeless about the future, you are way less likely to take action. And that puts the power back in fossil fuel companies and everyone else who wants to delay climate action as long as possible. These are not the people that we can rely on for a positive future. It may sound shallow when I say it, but no matter how bad things get, you have to believe that positive changes and actions are possible. I still think the door is wide open for us to avoid the worst effects of climate change, so that's what you should focus on. You have the power to take individual actions like eating plant-based foods, adopting minimalism, growing plants, and so on. You also have the power to communicate to others the actions that we can take and the changes that need to be made for a positive future. And even as climate change continues to become a bigger problem, there are still actions you can take. You may not be able to stop a hurricane or a drought, but you can control how you respond to it. You can control where you live, where you get your food and water from, how your lifestyle affects the people and the environment around you, and so on. Don't feel hopeless about all of the bad things that can or will happen. Instead, focus on the things that you can control and the positive changes that you can make. Because at the end of the day, the effort that you put in for these positive changes is still very much worth it. If nothing else, it will make you feel a lot better internally. Your goal should not be to fix climate change altogether, because nobody can do that alone. Your goal should be to maximize the positive impacts you can have on the environment and on your community. Your efforts can still help to prevent a lot of pollution, save a ton of water, save a lot of trees from being cut down, and help out the people around you in need. So with that said, here are some actions you can take to get started. Number 1, stop listening to the news. Like I mentioned earlier, the media loves to make headlines about natural disasters. If we want to make positive changes, we cannot be bombarded with depressing news that makes us feel like our efforts aren't worth it. And honestly, forget climate change. At this point, I don't think there is much positive news that I hear in the media anyway, so I'd rather not know about it. Number 2, do your part. Honestly, the best way to deal with hopelessness is just by taking action. Anxiety is usually a result of feeling like there's nothing you can do about it. By taking action, you are making a difference. It doesn't matter how small it is, because at the end of the day, it still counts. If you want to learn about some easy ways of how you can be more environmentally friendly, then check out the video in the top right corner. Number 3, keep learning. There's a whole lot about the future of climate change that we can't predict, so we got to be prepared for anything. One of the things that I'm learning more about is how I can individually prepare for the worst effects of climate change. That includes things like what insurances to get, what resources I should have at my disposal, what foods to grow, and a lot more. If that's something you want to learn more about, then check out the video in the top right corner. Number 4, make connections. Regardless of what the situation is, the best resource you can have at your disposal is people who care about you and each other. There's a lot that I don't know about, but knowing others who will have the resources and knowledge to help me and others out will make the future way less stressful. So meet people and make connections. We need it more than ever, especially in a world where we interact more online than in person. And that's it for this video. If you find it helpful, then please give it a like and subscribe down below. New videos are posted every Friday, either a topic about climate change like this one or a really fun outdoor adventure. Remember, don't feel hopeless about climate change. Focus on what you can control and take action, because nature can live without us, but we can't live without nature. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya!